People think old age brings peace, but peace don't come easy when betrayal lives in your blood. I've lived 82 long years. Long enough to bury lovers, friends, enemies, and even pieces of myself. But the one thing I never buried was the truth. Because truth, no matter how deep you bury it, got a way of crawling back up to the surface, like roots breaking concrete. My name is Zorélia Mae Vaughn, daughter of Amos Vaughn, the only child he ever called his mirror soul. He used to say I had eyes like his mama and fire like his father. Said I was born with the blood of builders and warriors, and he made sure I never forgot it. But after he passed, that same blood turned cold. My own kind, the ones I sang with in church, shared spoons with at the dinner table, turned on me like wolves. Over land, over money, over legacy, they thought they won. Thought I'd vanish like dust. But this ain't just a story about stolen inheritance. This is a story about respect, about patience, about the long game. This is how I taught my siblings that revenge, when served slow and smart, doesn't just heal, it teaches. So sit back, sip your tea, because I'm about to tell you how Zorélia Vaughn lost everything, and then took back more than money. Before we get too deep, let me ask you something. Go ahead and tap that subscribe button. I ain't just telling tales, I'm passing down truth. And trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Mississippi sun ain't gentle. It don't ask you if you're ready to sweat, it just shows up and expects you to adjust. But that's the South for you. Beautiful and brutal, sweet and sharp, like a magnolia bloom with thorns on its stem. The scent was always strong in May, strong enough to distract you from the smell of red clay baking in the heat. That's when Daddy would say, "Zo, the earth's talkin'. You just gotta be still enough to listen." I was born in a small clapboard house, right at the edge of Dearwater County. Folks don't talk about Dearwater much anymore, but back then, it was all cotton. The kind of town where everybody knew your daddy's name, and if you messed up, your mama found out before you even made it home. Neighbors shared sugar, secrets, and sorrow in equal measure. We lived near a dirt road with no name, just past the white church and the oak tree that split in two after the 1942 storm. Life was quiet, predictable, hard. My daddy Amos Vaughn wasn't a man of many words, but when he spoke, it felt like scripture. He was tall, with skin like roasted pecans and eyes that missed nothing. Called me his mirror soul, said I had his fire, his stubbornness, his spine. He'd take me out to the land, walk me through rows of okra, corn, and butter beans, and tell me, "This land got memories, oh. It remembers who loves it right. And one day, it'll remember you." He taught me how to read the clouds, when to plant by moonlight, and how to haggle with buyers at the market. We'd sit on the back porch at dusk, chewing sugar cane, watching the fireflies rise. He'd pull out the old family Bible, not to read from it, but to hide things. Deeds, letters, war bonds. He trusted that Bible more than any bank, said banks fold, but this word don't. And just like that, without saying much, he made me his keeper of secrets. Mama was made of colder cloth, always worried what the church ladies thought, always whispering about who wore what and who sat next to who. She wanted a dainty daughter. Got me instead. Tough, brown-skinned, sharp-tongued little thing with dirt under my nails and dreams too big for our porch. She'd straighten my dresses so stiff I could barely move, then scold me for climbing trees or roughhousing with the boys. She favored Elijah, my baby brother. Always brushing his curls, always telling folks he'd be a preacher one day. She'd slap my hand if I reached for more chicken, but pile his plate high. I loved him, Lord knows I did. But even at 7, I saw the difference. Elijah was sunshine in Mama's eyes. I was a storm she kept trying to tame. She'd call him my golden boy and me that wild girl. And I'd swallow it, tuck it somewhere deep where it sat like a stone. Then there were my sisters, Betty Lou and Cordelia, pretty, poised, petty. Betty Lou had the kind of face boys wrote poems about. She knew it too. Walked like she was always on stage. Cordelia? Quiet, calculating, and cruel when she needed to be. They never did like that. Daddy spent more time with me. Said I was trying to be one of the men, Said I was nosy, greedy, always asking questions about deeds and money. But I wasn't nosy, I was observant. I saw the way Daddy would sigh when Mama criticized him. I noticed how Betty Lou pocketed things from Mama's purse. And I remembered how Cordelia once told Elijah, "Don't worry, one day all this'll be yours. Zoe, just playing farmer." They didn't like that I was always nearby, always watching, always listening. I kept journals under my mattress, notes on the land, crop yields, whispers I overheard, letters Daddy never sent. What they didn't know was Daddy already chose me. Chose me not 'cause I was oldest or loudest or prettiest, but because he trusted me to protect what he built. We had secret conversations in the barn. He showed me maps, taught me about land taxes, told me who to trust in town and who to stay clear of. He even let me sign checks when he was too sick to get out of bed. Back then, I didn't understand how deep resentment could grow in a family. Like weeds in rich soil. You don't see it till it chokes the roots. But Lord, I was gonna find out. Folks in town knew him as the proud owner of 62 acres of Mississippi soil. What they didn't know was that behind every field, every planted row, every fence post hammered into place, was me. I was barely 11 when he started taking me out before sunrise, away from the eyes of my mama and my siblings. He said the others didn't have the head or the heart for stewardship. But you, Zorélia, he'd whisper, you listen to the soil, you see what's coming before it comes. There were long nights we spent together under the stars, just me and him sitting on the porch swing, a jar of sweet tea between us. He'd talk about his grandfather, who once owned land before the law tricked it away from him. That fire never left Daddy. He always said, a black man with land is a king, but a black woman who can keep it, she's a queen they'll never see coming. Mama still never approved. She believed a girl's place was in the kitchen, in the church, and eventually in some man's house. She'd hiss when she caught me with Daddy's ledger. That's no business for a girl. My sisters Betty Lou and Cordelia never bothered to learn the land. They were more concerned with appearance and society tease. Elijah, our baby brother, was their golden boy. Charming, irresponsible, and adored. Behind closed doors, though, I saw the worry in Daddy's face. He knew the others wouldn't care for the land like he did. He'd mutter, they'll sell it the second I'm gone. That's why he made those quiet plans with me. That's why he trusted me alone. When Daddy fell ill, he knew the end was near. I sat by his bedside, holding his rough hand in mine. His voice was weak, but his eyes, those deep, serious eyes, held fire. The land is yours, Zorélia. The deed's in the family Bible. Hidden in plain sight. Don't let 'em take it from you. He passed 2 days later. The sun didn't shine the same after that. His funeral was quiet, but the silence screamed. No one cried as hard as I did. No one sat by the casket as long. I was the only one who kissed his forehead before they closed the lid. The morning after his funeral, the house was different. Colder. Mama cried, but not for Daddy. For the pressure of decisions now on her. My sisters wept like they'd lost their best friend, though they never bothered with him much in life. Elijah strutted around like he'd inherited the earth. I waited a few days. Then I opened the family Bible, Daddy's marked one. The envelope was gone. I asked Mama. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Said I was hallucinating from grief. Cordelia claimed there never was a will. Elijah said I was trying to take what wasn't mine. In the weeks that followed, things changed fast. They turned Mama against me, said I'd put strange ideas in Daddy's head, manipulated him. I was banned from the land, told to pack my things. They laughed when I cried. Said a girl had no right claiming land. That Daddy would have wanted the family to decide, not just me. Betty Lou even dared to tell me I was lucky they didn't call the sheriff on me. Imagine that. On land I bled for, worked on, and grew with. I was a trespasser now, an outsider in my own home. I left that house with a suitcase and my dignity, and not a single acre of the legacy I helped build. But I made a promise that day, deep in my soul. One day, y'all gonna wish you hadn't pushed me out. And that day would come. Oh, it would come with thunder, wrapped in grace, and sealed with the same hands that once turned that soil before sunrise. They say when your blood betrays you, the world seems colder. But I learned the hard way that the cold can shape steel. I left Mississippi with nothing but $23 folded into my sock, a battered leather suitcase, and the only photo I had of my father, Amos Vaughn, in his Sunday suit, holding a Bible and smiling like he knew I'd make it through hell. I caught a bus to Chicago, the city Daddy used to call the furnace of dreams. The Greyhound rolled in past midnight. The wind was mean. My shoes were too thin. I found a women's boarding house that rented beds by the night, $1.50, cash only. I paid for 2 nights. That was all I could afford. The next morning, I walked the South Side streets with my head held high and my stomach growling. I lied about my experience to get a job cleaning rooms at a cheap motel. The owner, Mr. Carlson, made me clean double rooms for single pay. When I asked for proper wages, he laughed and told me I should be lucky he let colored girls work at all. I bit my tongue. I needed the money. After shifts, I scrubbed dishes at a diner. The grease burned my hands raw. I slept in my clothes to keep warm. When the motel laid me off, seasons slowing, they said, I nearly lost the roof over my head. I was days away from sleeping on park benches. But I kept that photo of Daddy in my apron pocket, and every night I touched it like a prayer. One night, I found myself sitting on a church stoop, cold and hungry, thinking about going back to Mississippi, swallowing my pride and begging my siblings for help. But something inside me broke that night. Not in defeat, but in defiance. I said out loud, ain't no way I'm crawling back to thieves. I'd rather die on my feet. Then came Miss Glory. I met her on a street corner while looking for work. She sold homemade hair pomade from her stoop. She was Jamaican, tough as a lion hide, and she saw something in me. Took me in. Let me sleep on her couch. Said, you got hard luck in your eyes, but fire in your bones, that's the kind I trust. Her salon was tucked between a liquor store and a pawn shop, the sign barely hanging on, paint peeling like old secrets. Inside, though, pure magic. The smell of hot combs, hair grease, and incense filled the air. Women laughed, cried, healed there. And Miss Glory? She turned every broken woman into a queen before they left her chair. She taught me the art, twisting, pressing, trimming, listening. Listening was the real skill. In that chair, you didn't just hear hair stories, you heard life. And I soaked it all in. Within a year, I had my own corner in the shop. Within 3, I left and started my own. My first salon was in a rat-infested building with leaky pipes and no front window. But I had hands, fire, and ambition. I slept in the back room some nights, fought with landlords, battled roaches and racists, but my clients came, and they kept coming. Word spread like gospel. There were nights I stayed up till 3 a.m., massaging my swollen fingers and calculating how much relaxer I could stretch into a profit. I learned to barter with neighboring shops, trade braid work for security at the door. Hustle was my last name back then. Miss Glory checked in every Friday evening. She'd bring ginger tea and say, "Ya palms still smell like purpose? Then you doing fine." Her words were scripture to me. That woman planted seeds in me deeper than any sermon ever did. Then came Earl. Smooth-talking, light-eyed man who wore confidence like a cologne. The kind that walked into a room and women's spines straightened involuntarily. He had this low, syrupy drawl and a smile that could have been copyrighted. Earl wasn't just handsome. He was charismatic in the way that makes your gut second-guess your good sense. I met him on a Sunday evening after church, outside a corner diner that served the best peach cobbler in the South Side. I was standing in line, balancing my church hat in one hand and a bag of hair rollers in the other, when he tapped my shoulder and said, "Excuse me, miss, but is the sun out or is that just your smile?" Corny. Corny as county fair popcorn. But I laughed. It had been so long since I had laughed like that with a man. Since I'd felt seen, not for what I could do or what I had survived, but for who I was. Earl had that gift. He made you feel like you were the only woman in a crowded room. We sat and talked over cobbler and coffee, and by the time I got home, my face ached from smiling. He was attentive, showed up with flowers, sent notes to my salon in elegant cursive, took me dancing. For a woman who had clawed her way out of rejection and poverty, who had hardened herself like an oak tree in winter, Earl was springtime. So I said yes. Too fast. Way too fast. We married in 3 months. I wore a cream-colored dress and carried a bouquet of wild lilies. Earl kissed my knuckles in front of the preacher and promised to protect my heart. But what he really meant was that he'd pocket it and treat it like spare change. The first crack came when I noticed he started working late. Then came the cologne that wasn't his. And that laugh. The laugh he once gave me, he was giving it to someone else. A week later, I caught him in the back of my own salon. My salon. Pressed up against one of my junior stylists like they were starring in some sorry soap opera. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I calmly walked up, handed them both their last paycheck, and locked the doors behind them. I filed for divorce that same afternoon. The lawyer blinked when I handed him the papers, said I set a new record for fastest marriage to filing he'd seen all year. It was humiliating, sure, but it was also liberating. Earl taught me that some men don't come to love you, they come to live off your light, and if you're not careful, they'll leave you dimmer than they found you. That was the first and last time I let love distract me from my purpose. From that day on, I promised myself, the only vows I'd keep were to my dreams, my future, and my peace. Love, if it ever came again, would have to meet me at the top. Because I'd never lower myself for crumbs when I was born to bake the whole cake. I took the pain and poured it into polish. Rebranded my salon, painted the walls myself, made it feel like home for women like me, women who knew how to survive disappointment and still walk out glowing. After that, I expanded. I opened 2 more salons, started a line of hair products with Miss Glory's Herbal Secrets. And then I did something bold. I began buying property. Not just in Chicago, but back in Mississippi. Quietly. Plot by plot. Street by street. Some of the very land my family thought they stole from me, I was reclaiming in cash. I wasn't just building a business, I was building an empire. I bought up abandoned buildings, flipped homes, rented to single mothers who needed a break. I kept my prices fair and my reputation gold. People called me a miracle. Truth is, I was just focused. By the late 1970s, I had become what the old folks used to call a quiet storm. No flashy headlines, no magazine covers, no big interviews. Just business, handled with elegance, grit, and a quiet kind of vengeance. I didn't need the world to clap for me. My work spoke loud enough. Some folks screamed to be heard. Me? I let my success whisper. It all started with that first little beauty shop on the south side of Chicago. Lord, that place was tiny. But baby, when I tell you that shop had spirit, that chair of mine became a throne. Women came in tired, worn down, feeling like the world had wrung them dry, and left feeling seen, feeling beautiful, feeling whole again. Every dollar I earned, I saved. I didn't gamble. I didn't splurge. I didn't buy no fancy car or run after trends. I studied money. I studied markets. I bought that building within 5 years. Then the lot next door, turned it into a wig boutique. Then another property over in Bronzeville, turned that into a second salon. One brick at a time, one property at a time, I was building more than wealth. I was building a foundation. By the 1980s, I owned 17 rental homes across Chicago and Gary, Indiana. And baby, every one of them was clean, solid, and filled with families who knew and respected my name. I wasn't just a landlady. I was a provider. A quiet guardian. When a single mama fell behind on rent, I didn't throw her out. I offered her work at the front desk. When a young man tagged my property, I had him paint murals for the beauty school instead. I wasn't just renting space, I was creating a sanctuary. Next came my beauty schools, starting with the Zorélia Institute of Cosmetology. Then 2 more. I didn't just teach hair. I taught legacy. I gave scholarships to young girls who had fire in their eyes and nowhere to go. Some came from shelters. Some from group homes. I taught them discipline. I taught them dignity. I taught them how to own their own chairs, their own shops, their own names. I taught them that their hands could feed them, free them, and one day, crown them. Then I started bottling my own products. First came my hair revival oil, then lavender scalp butter and mango twist cream. I made the first batches in a rented church kitchen. I didn't expect the demand, but it grew like wildfire. Before I knew it, stores across 5 states were carrying my line. And not just any stores. Black-owned stores. Our stores. I used the profits to send more girls to school and bought more property so families could live with dignity. Through it all, I stayed quiet. I didn't chase the spotlight. I didn't show up at conferences or seek applause. I wore my head wraps, my gold-rimmed glasses, my long skirts. I carried myself like my grandmother taught me, with pride and patience. Folks looked at me and saw just another church lady. But I didn't mind. That was the plan. Never let your left hand know what your right hand is building. I only went back to Mississippi once, for Mama's funeral. The heat felt heavier than usual that day, like it carried memories soaked in grief and old arguments. My siblings were stunned when I stepped out of that sleek black car with a private driver. Elijah's mouth twitched like he had tasted something bitter. Cordelia whispered something about me, turnin' bougie. Betty Lou came in for a hug, but pulled back quick when I looked her in the eye, like a mirror they weren't ready to face. At the end, they were loud. Bragging about how they owned the Vaughn land and how Daddy always favored them in the end. I just smiled, nodded, held my purse close like it held a secret. It was a warm Wednesday afternoon when the truth finally slipped through the cracks. I had just finished my herbal tea when the phone rang. The voice on the other end was shaky, burdened with something old and unresolved. It was Cousin Larnell, mouth of the family, always full of stories. But this time, she was shaking. "Z, baby, I've been sittin' on something I should have told you long time ago," she began, her voice trembling. "When Uncle Amos passed, there was a whole mess, you know that. But what you didn't know? That old King James Bible he kept at the church, not at the house, the one on the pulpit of First Light Baptist, he put something in it. I saw him tuck a big white envelope between the pages just days before he died. That Bible, Daddy's Bible. I remember it now, worn leather, edges gold but fading, always resting near the altar, always open to Proverbs. He used to say it comforted him more than any doctor ever could. I thought of all those mornings we spent on the porch, his voice steady as he read scripture, the air thick with dew and sunlight. "You sure it was the church Bible?" I asked, needing her to say it twice. "I'm sure." He said, "What's done in the light can't be hidden in the dark." I think that was his real will. I didn't wait. Next morning, I boarded a flight to Jackson, Mississippi. Took a rented car into Bell Hollow, my hometown, my ghost town. I drove straight to First Light Baptist. Red brick, magnolia trees drooping like they were tired of holding secrets. Still locked tight, except on Sundays. But I knew where Daddy kept the spare key, behind the loose stone to the left of the steps. Inside, the air smelled of dust and time. I walked up the aisle like I was walking through memory. That Bible still sat there on the altar, untouched, like it had been waiting for me. Now let me tell you something about Amos Vaughn. My daddy wasn't a pastor. Never wore no collar, never preached no sermon. But he built that church with his own 2 hands. Helped lay the foundation stones, painted them pews, even paid for the stained glass windows when the community couldn't afford it. That church was part of him. He trusted it more than any safe or lawyer. He once told me, "Z, when people get greedy, they'll tear through homes, break into drawers, and burn the truth if it benefits them. But no one dares to desecrate the house of the Lord." So he hid his will in the one place he believed would protect it. In God's house, in God's word. My hands trembled, but they were sure. I opened that book like it was my own heart. Page by page, my fingers flipped until they landed on something thick between Psalms and Ecclesiastes. A white envelope. It had my name on it. For Zorélia Mae Vaughn, do not let them silence you. Inside were the land deeds, a notarized will, a letter from Daddy, copies of registry filings, clear proof that someone had tried to bury the truth. But Daddy had left it where no one would think to destroy it. In plain sight, in God's house, I took pictures of everything. Then I closed the Bible, tucked the envelope into my purse, and walked out of that church with my head high. That night, I didn't sleep. I read every word of that will in my motel room, as if Daddy was reading it to me himself. Every page was proof I wasn't wrong. I wasn't crazy. I was robbed. By sundown the next day, I sat across from a young lawyer, sharp as a razor and quiet with shock. "This was hidden in a church Bible for over 40 years, he asked. I nodded. "And it's about to change everything." I walked out into the Mississippi sunset holding that folder tight. Not just documents, not just rights. It was my truth. My father's voice finally breaking through the silence. "And baby?" The winds were stirring. They had no idea what storm was about to hit. Now listen, if you've made it this far into my story, thank you, truly. And if this tale is stirring something in you, if you believe in justice, in family truths, in voices that refuse to be buried, go ahead and click that subscribe button right now. Hit that bell too, baby, 'cause we got more stories to tell. And I want you sitting right here with me when I do. They all stood outside the county courthouse in Tupelo. Elijah in a worn-out gray suit that barely fit, Cordelia with her lips pursed like she'd sucked a lemon, and Betty Lou holding on to her Sunday hat like it was her last crown. Confusion lined their faces, and I know they were wondering who had stirred the legal pot. The bailiff called the case Zorélia Mae Vaughn v. the estate of Amos Vaughn. When I stepped in, dressed in pure white from head to toe, silk scarf, tailored suit, soft pearls, even white gloves, you could have heard a pin drop. Heads turned, eyes widened. I didn't walk into that courtroom. I entered, like truth itself had come to collect a debt. Betty Lou gasped. Elijah blinked like he'd seen a ghost. Cordelia clutched her purse like it might shield her from judgment. I took my seat at the front, calm, dignified. Not one of them said a word. The judge, a younger black woman named Justice Rowe, nodded respectfully at me. "Miss Vaughn, we're ready for your statement." I reached into my handbag and pulled out two things: a laminated copy of my father's real will, dated and notarized, and the old family Bible, worn, marked, and holy. I placed both on the table. "My father taught me to read land deeds before I learned to read Psalms," I said, my voice steady. "He left the land to me. These are his words, unaltered. They were hidden because they knew I'd return one day. And now I have." The courtroom was silent, except for the soft creak of the judge's chair as she leaned forward, reading carefully. My siblings sat stiff, like mannequins in a department store window. Even the air felt thicker. When she finally spoke, her voice cut through the tension like a blade. "According to the evidence presented, this court finds that the rightful ownership of the Vaughn estate lies with Miss Zorélia Mae Vaughn. All current occupants are to vacate the premises within 60 days. Betty Lou collapsed into her seat. Cordelia tried to protest, but the judge raised her hand. "Elijah Vaughn, Cordelia Vaughn, Betty Lou Vaughn, you knowingly benefited from a falsified estate. You have no legal claim." There was a shuffle behind me as folks in the back whispered, folks who remembered my father and his word. Some murmured, "Amen." One old man even tipped his hat toward me. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just stood, nodded at the judge, and walked out of that courtroom with the same quiet dignity I entered with. My heels clicked like punctuation marks on polished tile. But inside, I was burning with the satisfaction of a battle long fought, and finally won. I had stood where justice sleeps, and woke her up with my name. Elijah came first, swagger gone, shoulders slumped, belly flatter than I remembered. He waited for me outside my church, dressed in an oversized suit he'd borrowed, his eyes shaded with shame. The same man who once spat my name across the dinner table now called me sister. Said he just wanted to talk. I let him. He was broke. Not tight on cash, broke, he was destitute. No work, no savings, and his youngest son had been arrested the week before. His house had no heat, and the bank had already begun sniffing around. He needed money. Mercy. I listened, arms crossed, my heart soft, but not foolish. This was the brother who told me I didn't deserve land because I was a woman. Now he stood before me, a shell of himself. I nodded slowly and told him to write it all down. Every penny he owed, every property he risked, every favor he needed. I told him I'd think about it. He left, thanking me like I had handed him salvation. But I only gave him hope. Next came Cordelia. She didn't come in person. She couldn't. Cancer had eaten through her pride and into her liver. Her eldest daughter sent a letter, a desperate one. Cordelia needed surgery, fast, no insurance, hospital bills mounting. She was clinging to life, but still too proud to call me herself. I read the letter twice. I made some calls. I found out the house was in her husband's name. I bought the debt that kept it afloat. Then I arranged to have her treatments covered, but under the condition that she never know it was me. Betty Lou was last, always the performer. Her house was already up for foreclosure, and I made sure I was the highest bidder. She didn't know it was me. Not at first. But when the papers came in, signed with my name in the corner, she stormed into my office like a thundercloud. "You gonna put me on the street, Zorélia? After all this time?" I looked at her for a long time, let her words hang in the air like smoke. "No," I said. "I'm not putting you on the street. You're gonna stay right there, as my tenant, and rent's due on the 1st. She stared at me, jaw trembling. I saw something flicker behind her eyes. Not rage, not grief. Something worse. Recognition. She finally understood that I wasn't the little sister she used to boss around. I was the woman who owned her roof. They all came to me eventually, heads bowed, voices hushed. The same siblings who laughed at me, who called me the forgotten one, now walked on ground I owned. They knocked on doors I had keys to. Pride is heavy when your pockets are empty. But dignity? That's something I carried even when I had nothing. I didn't do it for revenge. I did it because sometimes justice needs a receipt. And I had kept them all. I could have thrown them out. I had every right to. The land was mine. The will had spoken, and so had the courts. But eviction would have been too easy, too clean. And frankly, it would have let them off the hook. I needed them to feel it, to understand what they had done to me. Not through vengeance, but through service. Through sweat. Through submission to the very woman they tried to erase. So, I gave them jobs, not as punishment, but as penance. Elijah, the baby brother who once told me, "You ain't got no say round here," now had a mop in his hand and mud on his boots. I put him in charge of the same land he once stole, our father's fields. He cleaned, plowed, and tended it daily, under my supervision. He dug trenches, planted crops, and mended fences, all under the southern sun that once blessed our childhood. When he grumbled, I reminded him, "Every inch of this ground carries my name now. You walk on it, you work for it." Sometimes I'd catch him standing still, staring out at the pecan tree Daddy planted the year I was born. I never interrupted those moments. I let the silence teach what my words couldn't. Cordelia, always the showy one, got stationed at my beauty school. She stood in front of eager young students, passing on techniques she barely understood. I made her learn the curriculum and earn a certificate. She fumbled at first. Her hands shook. But over time, she started to soften. Her voice gentler, her eyes more honest. The pride in her began to bend, not break. And in that bending, she found something close to humility. As for Betty Lou, the so-called manager of the family, I gave her the rental properties. Let her collect the rent, manage tenant complaints, handle burst pipes and leaking roofs. She walked into that role thinking she was back in control. But every check, every repair, every decision still went through me. I kept her humble with silence. No praise, no insults, just business. Cold, clear, unmistakable. When tenants called to complain, they didn't ask for her, they asked for Miss Zorélia. She'd smile politely and redirect them, but I could see it wore her down. That invisible shift in power, It bruised more than any slap ever could. I never raised my voice. I never humiliated them in front of others. That wasn't my way. But I made sure they remembered. Every locked file cabinet, every office they had to knock on before entering, every check they signed with my signature at the bottom. No one else knew. But they did. And that was enough. Sometimes, revenge doesn't look like fire and fury. Sometimes it looks like order, like structure, like the slow drip of truth soaking into the bones of those who forgot your worth. So if you stayed with me through this story, thank you. Thank you for listening to a voice that waited decades to be heard. My name is Zorélia Mae Vaughn, and I didn't just survive betrayal. I outgrew it. And if you believe in justice, in strength, and in stories that heal, go on and hit that subscribe button, because baby, I've got plenty more where that came from, and you don't want to miss what's coming next.